Thanks everyone to join the webinar today on how to manage ERP implementation risks. We are just going to start off with the agenda. So we're going to just do an introduction and then talk about key implementation steps that are involved and lessons learned, common issues, ERP implementation disasters in the news, as well as recommendations and mitigating risk details will be covered, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. Sorry, we took we had some technical issues, so it just took a couple of minutes longer to start. I just want to make sure we have all the attendees who had confirmed login. So if you have any issues with listening to the presentation on the web, you're able to connect via phone, and the phone connection details are listed online as well. So we will go on to, I'm just going to read out the slide numbers as well so that you can basically follow through in case you have any issues connecting on the website of the conference. So just an overall BizTech risk and security practice, we've mostly performed audits and reviews or assessments, helping clients with initial assessments. And the details we cover here include information that we have learned over the course of the various audits and assessments or strategy consulting that we have performed. And from the attendees overall, we can talk about the different, I just received a message. I think we had some issues regarding the connection, so I think it's working now, fine now. So Kelly, in case there is an issue, please let me know, or you can dial in at, I'll send an email with the number as well. So going on further to the next slide, that's slide 4. Here are the high-level ERP implementation steps. We start off with a business case and business requirements document, and then there's a stage for ERP selection. And the next is, we cover implementation vendor selection as well. So, and that's typically covered in either it's a combined step. There's one RFP that covers all the details, or there's separate steps where there's a space for ERP selection, and then there's an implementation vendor selection stage. And then we come to project management and implementation tasks. And these are high-level tasks where basically we are covering development, testing, training, go-live, support, and change requests. And there are multiple activities within these high-level tasks. And lastly, there's a life cycle where there are patches and upgrades that are performed on the ERP. Saeed from our team is going to be adding on more context and other details as we go on. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Saeed?
No, I'm good for now.
Okay. Next, we're going to talk about the case studies or common issues that we have seen from the different audits and reviews and through the research that we've performed. And we've categorized lessons learned and issues observed based on issue area on the next slides. So the first area is business requirements. What we found in a lot of cases when there are vendors providing ERP implementation and the requirements have been developed internally, or they could be done externally as well within an organization. When the requirements are high level or vague or incomplete, then it leads to the implementation vendor or developers taking a narrow approach to to the scope overall. So they would usually take down the narrowest version of the requirements in terms of the scope. And also, it's always good to have business context. So many times you have technical people only doing the development, and there's no involvement of business experts or subject matter experts working closely with the developers. And what that leads to is the developers not having real knowledge of the business and not customizing or making the product to fit in the requirements of the business. The other issues we've noticed with procurement or vendor selection. So we always find most organizations use some sort of a vendor questionnaire, but it's good to have a structured vendor evaluation questionnaire. And we've seen many times that organizations have tried to use questionnaires, but they are not appropriate questionnaires with all the detailed questions and of the vendor and how they're going to implement and how they will involve subject matter experts closely. And that's that comes typically in terms of making the right questionnaires. And also, we've seen that a vendor contract sometimes state that the vendor will own the enhancements. So if they do any customizations, that the ERP vendor will own those customizations, and that creates a lot of problems later on, where essentially it's difficult to make any updates, or if their relationship with the vendor has soured, then it becomes very hard to get the code or even to maintain or manage or make any changes. So it's always good to make sure that the ownership of any customizations is with the organization.
And just want to quickly add some around vendor selection and vendor management. So in the previous two reviews of ERP post-implementation, we have noted this is an issue with most of our reviews, that vendor selection has not been properly done, or it has been done with not the correct criteria, and especially for specialized industries where some people who can't afford PeopleSoft, Oracle, big names, they go for smaller vendors who might not have the right expertise in the business area. Technically, they might be sound, but on the business side, they might have might not have the right knowledge, and that would lead to the whole project failures. Thanks.
Okay, yeah. So next slide, we're going to talk about some additional issue areas. Some are project management. So as an example, we've seen cases that the project manager lacks authority or gets limited buying from the business. And what happens with that is that the business would not allocate appropriate resources, and the roles and responsibilities are not assigned correctly. And that causes issues because the teams will not be aware of what's going to be what they need to do during the course of the project. And also, it's always good to establish some project success criteria. And when those have not been established, there isn't a clear idea of the goals of the project, and people don't know what is ultimately required or what they are trying to achieve. And we've seen some organizations do a big bang approach where they want to make a big change all at the same time, and that increases the risk significantly. And it's always good to implement projects in phases or module by module. So we've seen many times that, for example, finance and HR are big areas. So start off with finance and then go with HR or supply chain or other areas. So next slide is slide 8. So this is about vendor management. So we touched a little bit earlier. We've seen many vendors, they have payments based on time and materials instead of milestones. And we've had, we've observed many situations where a vendor would just be billing the clients, and there's no deliverable that's been produced for 5 or 6 months. And later on, when there's a time to actually show everything, there's not much available. So to present, or there's still issues with the product. So it's always good to have a phased approach and make payments based on milestones or phases of the project. And then moving on to the next slide. This is just some of the ERP implementation disasters that have been in the news or talked a lot about. And here's some examples where a few years back, Nike had lost $400 million, U.S. Air Force $1 billion. And then there are some examples of HP and Hershey's, all around 100 to 150 million in costs with an ERP implementation going bad. And most of these, especially the HP and Hershey's issues, happened when, for example, they wanted to do a big bang approach of making a big change, and especially they coincided with the busiest time. And also, the root cause was basically they didn't do appropriate amount of testing before they moved to production. Now we're going to list out some of the recommendations on managing risks related to the issues we discussed about. So the first one is about project management. So it's always good to have a project manager that is experienced and who's been given an appropriate authority and is heard with senior management. So if the project manager is not experienced, they don't have any authority, it's very hard for them to get the right team together and be able to work on those projects. And we need to make sure that the project managers get appropriate buy-in from the business. So, and then one example about risk with project manager, one of the audits we worked on, it was just that the project manager had a lot of issues, but he was just not heard in the case, and that created a lot of problems for the ERP implementation later down the road. The next area is about business user and SME or subject matter expert commitment. And what happens typically in our ERP is that resources or subject matter experts from different departments are taken and put into the ERP implementation team, but typically let's say finance department subject matter experts, SMEs are taken, or HR SMEs are taken, but they are also required to do their operational work. So their reporting structure is with their operational managers, but they're also involved in the ERP implementation, and many times their duties are kind of split and their focus is not really completely on the ERP. And so there's not as much commitment as what we have seen. And it's always good when you're starting out in the project to identify those users or employees who are likely going to be with the organization for the duration of the ERP. I know it's hard, but one example we observed was that a lot of employees and users who were selected for the ERP implementation were almost retiring or on the way to retirement, and that was sometime in the middle of the year. It was a one-year-long project, so that created a lot of basic issues where people were just not as committed to the ERP implementation on the business side. Now the next area we had talked about vendor selection, and basically it's always good to do good reference checks and get proposals from a few vendors and then select. And when doing the interviews with the vendors, it's always good to have another third party or internal, if you have the internal expertise, an internal or external third party technical expert to interview the vendor, because ERP implementations can become very complicated, and it's good to do thorough due diligence at the start so that there are no issues later on. Other than that, we talked about vendor management a little bit, where basically payments are made based on milestones or deliverables, and we always suggest to take a cautious approach and monitor and validate the vendor's work rather than just following what the vendor is saying. So one example of how to do that is to establish key performance indicators, and this could be taking each small component or part of the piece of the work or modules of ERP as they are delivered incrementally, and making sure you have testing performed before you make payments, and testing performed and sign off, and have some KPIs such as number of bugs found or if something is delayed. So those would be metrics, and the payment would be based on some of the metrics as well. So have a base payment as well as some incentive or penalties in the contracts. And we see many of those contracts when they are set up like that, it always gives the vendors the incentive to provide better service. The other very valuable option to have is to do, actually it's a requirement to do a prototyping and proof of concept phase with the vendor. Many times organizations just want to get into the development or implementation directly rather than doing having the vendor perform a proof of concept or do a prototype, a quick view of what the end product or functionality will look like. So it's always good to do a prototype before going on with a full-blown implementation. The next area is vendor payments. We've already talked about key performance indicators and holdbacks. So I think I've covered that part. Now regarding business requirements, it's just a matter of making clear business requirements document and also supporting it with use cases and detailed design specs. So when the specific requirements are not put in place, developers typically do take a narrower version of the requirements, or they just make something that's not what the business expects. So it's always good to do due diligence and review of the requirement before giving the work to the developers. Now, many organizations have a PMO. Sometimes they have a project management office. Sometimes it's IT-based. What we typically advise clients is to have an enterprise-wide PMO, and that helps with everyone following a standardized project management process. And some organizations are small and they don't have a PMO, and that's okay, but it's always good to have some standard across the organization because ERP touches different aspects or business units. So adopting a standardized governance and project management process that is aligned with the organization's overall strategy will help everyone be aligned in delivering the ERP correctly. And it's always good for the executive management to review the status of the ERP project progress going during the course of the implementation. And also we found a lot of cases where basically there's been project burnout, so low productivity and motivation, lack of motivation are the risks related to that. And that happens when users or subject matter experts have been overburdened with ERP implementation requirements, and a best way to handle that issue or risk is to obtain and solicit feedback from the project staff on a regular schedule. And we've seen different ways of doing it. If it's a larger team, it's good to use a survey every on a scheduled basis, a periodic basis. It could be done on a bi-monthly or a monthly basis, so that they have a voice in that is being heard. Because for a 600-person organization, we saw that almost all the project team members were extremely frustrated, and it's only when we went in to do an assessment of the ERP implementation is when they felt that the voice was getting heard. Otherwise, there was no method for them to voice their concerns during the course of the implementation. So we covered on project roles and responsibilities. Project managers should assign those clearly and create a work breakdown structure that is well documented, and there should not be any confusion with the subject matter experts or development team in what they will be doing. And many times that happens when, let's say, in finance there are two people and both have been asked to help on the same thing and they don't know individually what they have to do. So the work breakdown structure helps them understand what exactly is their responsibility. The next step is about business user training. We've seen a lot of vendor deliveries where appropriate documentation or training is not provided to the actual employees or user teams. So it's always good to have appropriate documentation and have it in the contract that the training should be good training will be provided, or have a plan so that you can get training delivered to the employees. As without training, there's a lot of frustration and lack of buy-in, and users may just try to figure out workarounds rather than doing it the correct way or doing it efficiently and effectively. I'm going to touch a little bit about product customization. So ERPs typically, when you're selecting ERPs, there is an option of buying a little expensive ERP which has a lot of things built in. But sometimes what organizations do is they sometimes get a cheaper ERP and they think the vendor usually says there are a lot of customizations that can be done. So when they are looking at customizations, they think it will be tailored to meet, so organizations think that can be tailored to meet their requirements. And the vendors would promote that a lot of times as well, because when customizations are involved, it would mean that there would be more billing from the vendors. So the issues that happen when there are a lot of customizations are that it's very difficult to upgrade. Let's say you have a Microsoft Dynamics ERP and you've done a lot of vendor customizations. When you want to upgrade, those customizations don't upgrade very easily. So we had a client where basically for them to do the upgrade to the next version, the amount of effort was equal to implementing the whole ERP again. And that was just because of the customizations that were being done by the vendor, that had been done in the past. So in software development, our implementations we call built-in versus bolt-ons. So it's always good to get something that's built-in functionality or use built-in functionality rather than get bolt-ons. And we've had some areas we observed that overall that the total cost of ownership is sometimes cheaper when you get something more expensive at the start, because bolt-ons or customizations will require a lot of support and dependence on the implementation vendor. Moving on to the next is testing. So we covered on some of the issues that happen that have been in the news on losses due to inadequate testing. So we always suggest to do performance testing and security testing. So many organizations think functional or user acceptance testing is sufficient. But what happens is many times the ERP product works fine in test, but it fails in production, and we see that happen a lot. And it's just because appropriate performance testing is not performed. And the best thing to do is, performance testing. There's a load testing or stress testing, and you see what is the expected number of users and test with that amount of load. Examples include we have, we've seen some ERP implementations where the reports that are being generated are not basically when the reports are being generated, the whole system slows down, or when time entry is being performed, a lot of users entering time at the same time in the week or in 2 weeks. That's when the ERP becomes really slow and it's very hard to enter time. Then security testing is again important. We had security review. We observed one case where there was an issue with the privacy aspects of the ERP. Basically, the people's social insurance numbers and salaries and date of birth were visible for everyone in the back office of the ERP. That is an example. In other cases, there's just the data transfer and security risk. So it's always good to do performance testing, or sometimes what happens is that we've gone in and done a security threat risk assessment, which includes performance testing as well as security review as well. So in conclusion, what we have is requirements and scope. It's good to have detailed requirements. Payments should be tied to deliverables, and strong project management function should be present for an ERP implementation. and not just dependence on the vendors, project managers. There should be an internal or another party that's evaluating the vendor's performance as well. And then from a testing perspective, it's very important to do testing. I had a lot of cases where sometimes the reports that were generated from the ERP were not giving correct information, or were just, when the reports were being run, the system was crashing. And another part of testing is user acceptance testing. So we've seen a lot of people do get the user acceptance testing to be done by the subject matter experts who are part of the ERP team. And what happens is that those users may not test things that others would. So it's always good to get a sample set of users from different departments who have not been involved in the implementation and have them perform the user acceptance testing. It helps in finding bugs because they'll try it and try something that's not been done before, and also they will have a buy-in as they will feel that they've been part of developing the system rather than something that's forced on them. So I think that covers everything. We'll have some time for question and answers. If anyone has any questions, you can reach me over the email. The contact info is listed below. Or you can send a chat message with your question as well, and we'll be taking questions now. Okay, so we've got a question on what is the biggest risk with ERP implementation. So from all the different risks that we've talked about, I think the ERP buy-in is the biggest risk that we've found. And then we've got another one about what type of issues we have seen after go live. So most cases what we've seen is reports that I mentioned earlier, that reports generating the reports have had issues, either errors in the reports or when a big report is run, the whole ERP crashes. So again, it's going back to performance testing and having a good performance testing in place. And yeah, so I think that's all the questions I have so far. Again, you have the contact information listed. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email, and then we'll look at getting those questions answered. Thanks everyone for joining, and we will let you know, we'll send you details on the next presentation or webinar that we have, and I think it will be happening next month as well. So bye-bye.